Hello and welcome to Podtoid. We are your hosts. I'm CJ.
I'm Chris.
I'm Dan.
I'm Charlotte.
I'm Occams.
And this is episode 413. We're going to have a pretty good show for you today, or maybe just a decent show or terrible show. Haven't really decided how it's going to go just yet. But we do have a lot to talk about. We're going to touch on some No Man's Sky, some Call of Duty, and then talk some Mortal Kombat. And a little bit later, we're going to be taking a quick look at Gamescom, which took place this week. Charlotte, you're in that part of the world. Did you get out to Gamescom at all this year?
No, it is like 2 or 3 hours on the train away from where I live. I did consider it, but I think personally, I'm not a big fan of trade show style events. I have considered going to EGX in Birmingham at some point as like visiting my parents, sort of rolling that into one. I can't say Gamescom particularly appeals to me, to be honest.
Well, they're trying. From what I heard at E3, they're trying to make it go bigger than it is even now, and that they may be introducing like a U.S. branch of it. So Gamescom New York or something.
Without a doubt, Gamescom this year was like the biggest it's been, and really pushed with like its opening show, really pushed to be like E3 Part 2, essentially.
Yeah, there's just so much fucking news out of it this year, right? And I don't think I've seen it in the past to be even comparable to what they did this year. So, too many trade shows, too many games. We need less games, just like one.
Well, one game a year. That's
one game a year, and it's Madden.
Just a game.
Yeah, and if it's bad, then, well, didn't work out, try again next year.
But before we get into talking about games, I just wanted to start us off with some non-game related news, and this is a story actually about a drug arrest gone awry. So we're going to go to Sweden, where I did not know this, but Sweden has some of the strictest drug laws in Europe. Possession of marijuana could land you in prison for 6 months, and you'd have to pay a hefty fine, even if you're using it medicinally, because they do not recognize medicinal marijuana as a form of treatment. So very strict drug laws. They don't fuck around with it, and that's actually what got one woman in trouble this week. According to the Leaf Desk, which is my favorite name for a marijuana-based news site, 2 plainclothes officers spotted a woman smoking a joint in public and went to arrest her. As they approached the woman, a man on a nearby park bench approached the officers and started punching them in the face. One of the officers then spotted the man tossing away a baggie of weed, so he was about to get in trouble as well. The officers turned their attention to the man and went to arrest him. However, just as one of the officers was reaching to grab the baggie of weed that the man threw, a seagull swooped in, grabbed the bag, and took off.
Going to a party, I guess. How many animals is that now that we've talked about taking drugs? It's got to be 3 or 4 by now, hasn't it?
Dogs and
I mean,
seagulls.
we have no evidence that the bird took the drugs. Could have wanted to just sell them on. We don't know.
Yeah.
Wait, was it Rescuers Down Under that had like this sort of mentally impaired seagull, or was it, or was it Little Mermaid? I forget.
The Little Mermaid had kind of a crazy seagull in it.
Yeah. All right. That's all right. Just wanted to cross-reference that.
I read this and I just thought immediately that the seagull was like one of those seagulls from Finding Nemo, and it's just like mine, and went and grabbed that bag of weed.
There was a small headline, well, not a headline, but there was a small story in one of the rags that passes for the British press this week, where they were talking about how seagulls are getting so much more aggressive over here because they are like they're I was in a hotel once and it just came through the window and just wandered around looking for like food that I had in my hotel room. But and they literally just said in this article, police have basically said that they don't want people calling the police because of a problem involving seagulls, because the police have been getting more phone calls about, I've got a seagull and he won't leave my window or whatever. But the article itself literally said like something along the lines of, the police don't want to hear any more, no matter how much you may be bothered by the psychotic little bastards.
Wasn't there also a story recently that was basically talking about how to deal with rampant seagulls and saying that you should stare them straight in the eyes when they're about to steal something from you, and that puts them off?
Right.
I mean, seems legit.
And if it has bloodshot eyes, then it's probably the seagull from this story.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's like in The Birds, just watching all those birds get murdered because they killed a lot of birds in that movie.
My favorite, so I guess my second favorite part after the fact that a seagull swooped in to steal marijuana was that the officers were so dumbfounded by what just happened, they stopped paying attention to the man they were arresting, and he ran off.
Hell yeah.
So not only did they not get the weed, they didn't get the guy either. They did, however, arrest the woman for possession, so she is still in trouble. I'm thinking, like, the seagull and the guy are partners. Like, he threw the bag, and he knew his pet seagull would come and swoop it up and take it to their hideout.
It's Pineapple Express meets Beastmaster.
I've never seen Pineapple Express.
Well, in Beastmaster, it was like kind of the Conan ripoff where he like hung out with animals. And he had an eagle that he had eagle vision, a couple of ferrets, Kodo and Poto, that could steal shit for him, and I think a panther or a lion maybe. And then Pineapple Express is Pineapple Express. So weed and I like that idea.
There's a Beastmaster 2 where he goes to 1986 Los Angeles as well.
Oh, buddy, I saw that in the theater the same day I saw Ghost Dad because it was a two for one showing. Yeah.
And Beastmaster 2 is so meta a movie that at one point when he arrives in Los Angeles, he walks past the cinema and they're playing Beastmaster at the cinema.
That's some Gremlins 2 shit right there.
And it's not even like a hidden gag. Like he literally does a double take on the side and they do a close up of it. So.
Yeah, wasn't that the inspiration for Adaptation?
yeah, sure.
All right, let's go ahead and now get talking about games. And for my part this week, I've mostly been playing Gris. I think that's how you pronounce it. I hope that's how you pronounce it. It's the joke I made in the article. This is the kind of artistic puzzle platformer that was released by Nomada Studio last year for Switch and PC. It just released on iOS. I played it on my iPad, and you plug in the headphones and you just absolutely get lost in it. One of the biggest problems that you have with taking a console game and moving it over to mobile is that they don't usually get the controls right, or the controls are so obtuse that it kind of takes you out of the game. This is not that case. This is the best platformer controls I've seen on touchscreen with mobile, and it just absolutely makes it a dream to play. So like no matter which way you play Gris, whether you play it on Switch, on PC, or now on iOS, I mean, it is just perfection every time you play it. Chris, I know you gave it a 10 out of 10. I finally finished it up yesterday. Like I would be hard pressed to give anything less than that. It is just so good. And I know that these types of games are hard as reviewers to kind of sell, because there's always that idea that it's just going to be, that we're, as a reviewer, are trying to sound very sophisticated when we recommend this really artistic game, and it's not actually good, but we just want to recommend it because we want people to think we're smart and arty. And I know that can be an issue with a lot of artistic games. This is not one of those ones, though. Like this is an easy recommend, even if you don't like the types of games that don't have massive stories and are just full of meaning and subtext. Like it is just so fucking good. And on mobile, it's $5. So what do you have to lose?
I don't think you got anything to lose. I think it's fantastic, and I gave it 10 out of 10. I couldn't bring myself to give it anything less. I played it once in one complete sitting. I just sat in the dark, headphones on, played it all the way through from beginning to end. It's brilliant. The world's gorgeous. It looks amazing. It sounds amazing. It's affecting. It's interesting. There's stuff to talk about. It has such great pathfinding in it and some fun kind of puzzles. And it just gave me a lot to think about when it was finished. I think the most important thing about your report here, your port report, is I'll level with you. When you said like, oh, I'm playing Gris on iPhone or whatever, I was just like, that's going to be shit. I was just like, there is no way that game will work on like an iPad, or in terms of like the immersion and pulling you into the world while you're just kind of holding, say, a 7-inch screen or whatever in front of you. So the fact that you came back to me, and I didn't say that to you, obviously, because I don't want to preconceive anything.
Right.
But when you came back to me and you were just like, that's fantastic, that game's amazing, you gave it the right score or whatever, then I was just so stoked that your first experience with it, they'd done such a good job that you weren't playing it on like a phone or whatever and being like, what the fuck was Chris on about? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's the fact that I played it on an iPad versus an iPhone that allowed me to immerse myself more in it, because it is a bigger screen, and with the larger screen, the larger Retina screen, God, it's so gorgeous. You catch a lot of the little animation details that they have in there that, you know, on a phone would be much more difficult to see. So I absolutely believe that it's because I played it on iPad. It's not why I thought it was a good game, but it's why I was allowed myself to become fully enveloped by it and just let it wash over me. And, you know, with the headphones in, I mean, it's a pristine, perfect package and a really outstanding way to spend 3 hours.
I remember it when I reviewed it. Like you were talking about the difficulty of reviewing these games, and in the comments, I think one of the very first comments was somebody like, "Oh, I see Indie-toid strikes again," and it's just like, well, I hear what you're saying, but like, sometimes these games, they hit you and it's something a bit different, and it's something that does take you to a different place than most of the other games you've played. I haven't played a game that I think is better or as good as it since I played it, and I played it in December. So, and that's obviously, that's just opinion, but it's my opinion, so that means it's the right one.
Oh shit. Okay. Moving on. Charlotte, you're talking about a board game this week?
So last night I had a board game evening with a couple of close friends, and we played a board game from Sweden called Time Stories. It's really hard. I've been thinking of how to describe Time Stories, and we played an expansion to it because we've already played the first episode, so to speak. And really, you're just playing a group of like time traveling agents who go to a certain time period and solve a puzzle. It kind of sounds like it's really generic, and it kind of is, but the beauty of it is that because there's so many expansions, you can go into a variety of different stories. Mm-hmm. And the episode 2 that we played last night was set in 1992 in Germany. I think it was in Germany. And it was very similar. I can't really say a lot without spoiling it, but it was kind of like some important child has been kidnapped and you have to bring her back. And then literally the moment you're plonked into it, you're like, oh, it's this kind of story. And it, like, just by looking at the box, you wouldn't have even known this was the theme of it. So it's kind of a spoiler to say what the theme is, but it ended up being a really exciting sort of story to explore. And what you have to do is you have to like solve the puzzle within a certain number of dice rolls, and you have different locations to sort of explore. And every time you change locations, you have to roll a time dice to see how much time passes. And the 2 episodes we've played so far, both of them, we've had to do at least 3 playthroughs to solve it. And we have absolutely no idea how you can do it in one playthrough because there's just so much information to go through. Yeah, and the first episode, so if you buy the starter pack, is set in a 19th century sanatorium. And I can't even remember what the puzzle is that you're solving. I think it's just trying to get out of the sanatorium. But it's pretty interesting. But I would say if anybody then goes on and reads more into Time Stories, I'm sorry that I can't really say much more about the episode I played because even the premise of it is kind of a spoiler. But the episode 2 that I played last night was really, really much more interesting to me than the sanatorium theme because it was set in 1992 and I like more modern stories. Mm-hmm. But we're going to play episode 3 at some point, and that is actually set, we think, from the box, not on planet Earth, and it's set somehow in the past. So, and they've brought out, I think, about 10 expansions by now. So it's kind of really hard to describe this game that I've put down on the list, but it's really fun, and it feels like you're playing a fully fleshed out kind of almost like you're playing a video game when you're playing the board game. So it's really fun use of your time. It's a bit expensive for one evening's worth of fun, but I feel like there's replay value because you pick your agent. Mm-hmm. So if you maybe let some time elapse and you forget most of the story, then it would be a lot of fun to replay it and pick a different agent with different skills and different like combat points or search points. So sometimes you have to have roll a certain number to explore something and get new items. So yeah, I would. And the forums are full of people creating their own scenarios that you can print out. And so I definitely recommend going to the forums and finding out more about it if it sounds interesting, what I've said.
So is it a fully cooperative game, or is there like competition?
Yeah, I should have said that. It's fully cooperative.
Right.
You're all working together to solve this puzzle, and in the first one it's to get out of where you're trapped, and then the second one it's a more sort of an objective that's like more like your agents who've been sent in to solve some sort of puzzle. So yeah, it was pretty fun.
And each of these expansion packs, is each expansion pack like dedicated to its own time zone? Is that how it works?
Yeah, each one's its own story. It's kind of the premise of the game is it's made itself extremely generic so that each expansion can be an entirely own story, because
right.
Your time agents traveling through time and space, and yeah, I guess the core premise of it is you only have a certain amount of time, and to get the best ending, so to speak, you have to complete it in one go through. But like I've said, we have at least with episode 2, we have no idea how you would do it in one playthrough. So
sounds cool.
Yeah.
Now, Charlotte, I have to ask, because I follow you on Twitter, did you beat The Last of Us?
No, I did not.
Did you get past those guys?
Oh, they're scary.
Is it like when Joey can't finish The Shining in Friends and he has to put the book in the freezer? Is it like
Pretty much.
All right, moving on. Chris, you've been trying out the new Call of Duty Alpha?
Yeah, I was playing it a little bit today and a little bit yesterday. I've not really got a whole lot to say about it, because it's one mode taking place on, I think, 4 maps, and it's gunfights, which is the idea is 2 teams of 2, and you have to make your way through a series of rounds, and it's the first to 6 rounds wins, and you go through a different arsenal of weaponry. So sometimes it's sniper rifles, and sometimes it's handguns and Desert Eagles, sometimes it's a rocket launcher. And there's just these selection of maps that are all kind of look like military training zones. They all kind of look like bases in Hereford and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And there's not a whole lot to say about it. It's basically another very competent, glossy-looking Call of Duty game. I've got no problem with those games. They're not my favorite series or anything like that, but I think there's a reason they keep making them and people keep buying them, and that's because they're still really glossy, well-made, addictive video games. And it looks like this year's Call of Duty will be another good Call of Duty game. Like it's so easy and lazy for people to just be like, well, Call of Duty still looks like Call of Duty this year. But the thing is that is the case. You know, they improve load times, they improve the character models, they improve the backgrounds and the stages and the textures and all of this stuff. But essentially, it's just a slightly improved version of last year's model with new maps and maybe a couple of extra modes. And in a way, there's almost nothing wrong with that, because the games are good. It's not like they're the only game you'll play that year, unless we go to that one game a year rule, in which case it's just going to be Call of Duty every year. But yeah, it's cool. There was a little bit of lag. I had a lot of fun with it. The biggest crash for me with it is because I've been playing Rainbow Six Siege so much. That's like going from like doing an operation with a scalpel to like doing an operation with a chainsaw. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I haven't played Call of Duty in a while, and I've gone from a game where you can sometimes sit in a corner and look at a 1-inch gap in a doorway for a straight minute, and then make sure you hit your mark with pixel accuracy, to like guys sliding under barriers, firing like dual machine guns, and with like an aim assist that means like it as long as you roughly spray in the area of like your opponent, you'll get them. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And that like that transition, it's like I used to be like Leon and now I'm like John Wick. That's like the difference between those two games. Do you know what I mean? But it looks cool, and I'm looking forward to Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I assume it's going to be just like another game that doesn't rock anyone's world, but it does what it says on the tin and delivers what the audience want from it.
You know, as long as it sells the 20 million copies it sells every year, I'm sure Activision will be fine.
Sure, they won't be hurting. No.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Dan. No Man's Sky. Everything I've been reading about this game online says that it's finally reached what its promise was. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like those initial promises were pretty broad. And I would say, though, if you look back to interviews with Sean Murray, pretty much everything that he would have mentioned, maybe outside of like weird space life, like aliens out in space and whatnot, pretty much on point. There's multiplayer now, which was like the major point of contention for a lot of people. I remember when that game launched, there was videos within hours of that game coming out of people trying to meet together, finding the same planet together, getting to the same point, and then not being able to see each other. It was a shit show. Well,
I mean, didn't they initially say that that it would take a long time for players to run into each other because the galaxy is so vast?
Initial explanation was like he'd be surprised if anyone even saw another player because the universe was so vast. And then, like I said, when the game launched, within a matter of hours, people tried to meet up and couldn't see each other and realized that the multiplayer was not quite multiplayer. But anyways, this is a game, though, that it's had such an incredible turnaround. Like, I enjoy this game so much, I lose track of time when I play it. On Tuesday, I was planning to watch SmackDown around 7, and I started playing No Man's Sky around noon. And I finally took a break. I got up, I stretched, I got some more coffee, and then I looked at the clock, and I realized it was almost midnight. I went, wow, I just missed SmackDown and played No Man's Sky for like 10 hours. Jesus. That's how much I've been enjoying this game. It's addictive. There's an addictive cycle of going to a new system and exploring weird planetary biomes that I really love. I also just really love the color palette of this game. Like the aesthetic of it feels like a 60s/70s like sci-fi kind of vibe. You have all these bright oranges, yellows, purples. Like it's not something you see in a lot of like space games. And yeah, on the topic of those planetary biomes, they've been adding so many different and weird and interesting little biomes in this game that it makes that galactic space jumping to new systems, as I said, really addicting. One of my favorites that I found so far was a bubble planet, and I mean like a literal bubble planet. When I landed, everything on the surface, other than I guess the ground, was round. The rocks, the plants, the clouds, the mountains in the distance, everything was round. The alien life were these weird floating bubble things that like dripped out of their bottoms. It was something. It's both alien and how it all looks. It's not just like typical little green men that you'll discover or weird bipedal creatures. You'll see some weird ass shit in this game.
That sounds amazing, and like I should probably put the copy that I bought and have sitting on my shelf and haven't even bothered playing. Probably put that into my PlayStation finally. Give it a shot.
It's worth it now. Like No Man's Sky went from being like, and I reviewed it. I reviewed it back on my YouTube channel, Infinite Backlog, back when it came out. And I kind of hate that video review now because I fucking hammered down on this game so badly. Called out Sean Murray. I did all the typical tropes. Like, he lied and lit all the crashing and all of these planetary biomes get boring after a while. They'll start looking the same. This game is so vastly different now from when it launched that I kind of feel bad about my old opinions of it.
I was going to say it's good to hear because I remember when they first announced No Man's Sky and they told you what it was going to be. I genuinely felt like it could be a game, like one of the best games of all time. Like the idea of having this really expansive universe, and they were like, and there'll be these animals, and you get to name planets if you discover them. And I genuinely thought this is like a lifestyle game that you could play for like the next 10 years and always be finding new stuff. And maybe we were all a little bit pie in the sky to think that was going to be the case, but you can always believe something until it's proven otherwise. Do you know what I mean? And I guess I'm just glad to hear that it's something more than that. Because when it was launched, more than anyone being like mad Sean Murray or anything like that. I was more just disappointed that it didn't match the scope of what maybe in my own mind I'd conjured it up to be. But it's good to hear that it is something more than it was at launch now.
All right, moving on, finishing up with Occams. Occams, what the hell is Ninja Terminator?
Well, let me tell you. All right, so Ninja Terminator is another Godfrey Ho movie. Chris,
okay,
you know what I'm talking about. It's this is pretty well tread territory. It's I think one of the more famous movies for these like shitty movies I've watched. So I won't give you too many details, but just there's a guy. What's his name? Richard Harrington. What's his name?
Harrison.
Yeah. And he looks like if Magnum PI had maybe an uncle in the 80s, same mustache, but like it's this all seriousness of like we must destroy the Ninja Empire and stuff. But in the middle of it, he'll to answer a phone, he'll pick up a Garfield phone. And it is as serious as a heart attack, but he's on a Garfield phone. And just there are these little moments. There's bits where the Ninja Empire is sending messages to people, and they do it through these. And I think, Chris, you talked about this last week. These little like wind up shitty robots. It's so surreal. I mean, it borders on like a David Lynch directed a sketch show or something, but it's supposed to be dead serious, and it's so good. And it's this weird thing where so you have these like white dudes dressed up as ninjas doing ninja stuff, and then you have what's his name, Jaguar Wong, yeah, and who's like this really really like charismatic, interesting guy, and it's his story in the movie, and it's just it is wonderful. I highly recommend it to everyone out there. It is batshit crazy, and just so much like your uncle wearing eyeliner kind of moments. Just so many middle-aged white dudes. Well, there's two, but it's enough because they're kind of like every middle-aged white dude.
I always said that Richard Harrison, he kind of looks like if you asked somebody like in the 80s, you said to someone to like describe a dad. Describe a dad, anyone's dad. They basically describe kind of what Richard Harrison looks like. But this is it's another, like you talked about last week, this is another one of those two films taped together movies. It's another Godfrey Ho. I filmed some white guys being ninjas, and then I bought a film from Hong Kong and inserted my white guy ninjas in just randomly into the narrative, and then redubbed the whole thing so the characters seem like they're talking about each other, essentially.
And the Richard Harrison's wife in the movie is just seemingly oblivious to his ninja antics. And I'm talking like ninjas show up at their house and he's got to fight them and like all of a sudden he's just in his ninja camo gear, which is that sort of like Arctic camouflage. Remember when G.I. Joe and Batman had to have 19 different kinds, like variations on camo for the toys? Yeah, it's like that. But there's one part where they're watching this film the Evil Ninja Empire sent to Richard Harrison that was like, hey, we've kidnapped this girl, and if you want to get her back, bring the like Ultimate Ninja statue. There's an Ultimate Ninja statue in this movie, by the way. And just the wife, who the whole time is like, hey, what's going on? That's crazy. They watch what essentially is a snuff film of this woman getting beat up. The wife has no reaction. They look like they were maybe watching, 4 Weddings. It on TLC, just zero reaction whatsoever. It's so wonderful.
That's actually his shoot wife as well. That's Richard Harrison's actual wife.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, Maria Francesca. She turns up in other ninja films playing his wife, even though he's not playing the same character. Usually in that house, because I guess that's also Richard Harrison's house with his actual Garfield phone.
So the Garfield phone is the best. It is so out of left field. Oh my God. It's such a good movie. Like I said, I found my copy on YouTube to watch, and you can buy it if you want to for a reasonable price online. And it's a treat. It's like a genuinely decent, like kind of like Hong Kong martial arts action movie. And then peppered in with bits of white guys in their like mid 40s pretending to be ninjas. And then when the fight scenes happen, it's clearly shot from far away because they got stunt doubles in to do the actual fighting. And it does that thing where it ends so suddenly, so fucking suddenly without really any kind of resolution. It's wonderful. I highly recommend it.
The hero of the Hong Kong film like the Jaguar 1 character, he's legitimately great.
Yeah, he is.
Like not even he's like he's charismatic as fuck. He's wearing this like black silk shirt with roses on it, and he's a really good fighter. He's like kind of almost like a Lupin the Third, cheeky. Like he's kind of like a cheeky guy who then when people call him on his cheek, he can just beat the shit out of him. He's always wearing sunglasses indoors, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I think the actor's called Jack Lamb, obviously an anglicized name, but he's like legitimately the one thing in the film that's actually really good.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Spike Spiegel. If Spike Spiegel were, a Korean dude or a Chinese rather. I think he was Korean, but it doesn't matter. He's painfully handsome. He's a very good fighter. He dresses so well. Everyone in this movie, by the way, except for the two ninja white dudes, like it's they dress like it's maybe the late 60s, early 70s, even though I think the film was in what, like 87, 86. And everyone is sort of insane. A lot of the bad guys have like these page boy mop haircuts. Mm-hmm. And the main bad guy for the not Yakuza, but whatever, like the drug ring organization, generic, whatever it is wearing, how can I put it? Like remember Drew Barrymore's haircut in Scream? It's that.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that haircut, and that shade of blonde as well.
Yeah, that kind of like pasty blonde, and it is painfully a wig, and it's never addressed. It's never brought up, though. In the beginning of the final fight of the movie, he takes it off as if it's some kind of giant reveal. I don't know if it was an artistic choice. I don't know what it's supposed to represent. Jesus Christ. Just watch the movie. It's so good. So good.
All right.
And I play Dragon Ball Fighter Z, and that's fine. Yeah, it's okay.
That is a good game. Before we move on to news, Occams, since you've been talking about all these wonderfully obscure and ridiculous films, I've been trying to find something to kind of to show that I know of garbage too, but unfortunately, I just don't know where to look, and I haven't been able to find anything that's so dumb and ridiculous to if not match, then somewhat measure up to what you bring to the show. But then Charlotte, Charlotte delivered me this golden goose this morning. You guys know who Rodney Dangerfield is, right? He cannot get no respect, I believe, is somewhat of his line. Did you know in the 90s he almost had a sitcom?
Yeah, I know what's happening, and I'm so into it. I'm here for this. Let's experience this together.
Charlotte, do you want to set up what the sitcom is, or do you not know?
I don't think I can without losing it. It's just so crazy and strange. Oh my God.
So it's in the 90s. It's about this young kid whose name is Rodney, whose favorite comedian, his hero, is Rodney Dangerfield. And he's at school, and at any point, he can summon Rodney Dangerfield to come and give him advice. So in the only episode they ever made of this, he was trying to get the courage to ask this really hot cheerleader out, and he calls in Rodney Dangerfield, who does like 3 jokes from his stand-up and then disappears. And then he gets caught cheating on a test, and he calls him back at the end of the episode. And Rodney Dangerfield is talking about how, I like it when women run away or I like it when women walk away from me. Usually they're running, just Rodney Dangerfield jokes. He's only in the episode for maybe 3 minutes, even though he is the star of it, because the rest of the show revolves around this kid, Rodney, his family, and his couple of his friends. By the way, 2 of his friends, one of them is Soleil Moonfry. The other one is Breckenmeyer.
A heavily mulleted Breckenmeyer, by the way.
Yes, a heavily mulleted Breckenmeyer. They only made the pilot. They didn't sell it. They ended up burning off this one episode in the summer, the same summer that they actually started burning off the Seinfeld episodes. Of course, the difference is Seinfeld eventually got picked up. But the reason why I bring this up is because Charlotte sent me a link to the theme song of Where's Rodney, and I would just like to play it in its entirety for all of us to experience. So without further ado.
Childhood I had. My mother breastfed me through a straw. Where's Rodney? When my old man took me to the zoo, they thanked him for returning me. Where's Rodney? Yeah, last week I looked up my family tree, 2 dogs were using it. That's the story of my life, no respect.
When I'm feeling down and I can't get around my frustrations, yeah, I try to find the guy who's always been my inspiration. If I could pin him down, where's Rodney?
I'm ugly, you kidding? Halloween, I open the front door, kids give me candy.
Where's Rodney?
And I was an ugly kid too, on the merry-go-round. They made me ride under the horse.
Where's Rodney?
My wife is dumb, are you kidding? You want to know how dumb she is? It takes her an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes.
Where's Rodney?
Okay, so that is the theme song to Where's Rodney. Just the most boomer jokes imaginable in... Oh, God, that was a minute. Oh, God, that was a minute.
We were all masturbating during that, right?
Because he's got a in fact, like, if that's not enough for you, he's got his own. He had a single, didn't he?
Rapping Rodney.
Yeah, which is again just a whole song of him just hitting one-liners, basically, for like 3 straight minutes.
That's like that Freddy Krueger album.
Yeah. You guys aware of Rover Dangerfield?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cartoon
he got an
series.
animated film where he was a dog, like.
Oh,
and it was funny as well because like he was a dog, but he didn't wear any clothes, but he did wear a tie because basically if Dangerfield wasn't adjusting his tie, he wasn't able to say a punchline, was he? He always had to adjust it. He was like, hey, you're all right. And it was always like that. So even the dog version of him was wearing a tie, so he was able to adjust it while making punchlines.
You know what I love about the theme song, other than everything? It was that narrative thing that they did in the 80s where they had to explain the entire plot of the show in the theme song. It's like how Charles in Charge just tells you exactly why Charles is in charge and how he's in charge, just the parameters of his being in charge. It's great.
Brilliant.
And I love how all of the jokes are just kind of like ha ha ha, but then he gets to the last one and he sounds really angry when delivering it. Like he really thinks his wife is that dumb. And he's mad.
He fucking hated his wife. That's why he killed her.
You are listening to Podtoid.
All right, let's go ahead and move it on to talking about the news. There was a lot of interesting stuff to cover this week. Obviously, we don't have time to cover it all, and we'll get to Gamescom just a little bit later. But first, we're going to go back to a favorite game here on Destructoid and talk about some Mortal Kombat 11. Chris, I saw on Twitter you ran into a rash of just a bunch of shitty players this week.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat 11 hasn't got a particularly respectful online community. There's and I kind of got a brunt of it in one session earlier this week. I had someone at the character select screen specifically like run off and get a microphone and come back and plug it in, even though I couldn't talk back to them because I wasn't on the microphone, just to kind of meander to themselves about how mad they were of the character I'd chosen. He was like, another fucking Cassie Cage, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Aaron Black, Sonya player. How boring. Here I go again. And then I had a whole bunch of people who quit out mid fight. It's a funny community. You get a lot of salt and stuff in the fighting game community, but Mortal Kombat 11's got a whole new level of kind of cowardly disrespect. Not so much in its competitive scene, but online, for sure. Yeah.
Well, hopefully these new additions to the roster will maybe get people to chill the fuck out. We already knew that Mortal Kombat 11 had a season pass with 6 characters that will be added to the game, 3 of whom are returning. They're Shang Tsung, Sindel, and Nightwolf, and 3 new guest characters. There was a lot of speculation around who these characters would be. I know that the name Ash from Evil Dead was thrown around a lot because there was that chainsaw soundbite, and also I think some people said they searched the metadata or something. I can't quite remember.
I got data mined.
Yeah. But in the end, the 3 final characters revealed for this possibly first of 2 season passes was Spawn, the Joker who looks like a porn star, and the T-800 Terminator that uses Arnold Schwarzenegger's likeness but not his voice. Chris, again, I go to you. Which of these 3 characters are you most interested in?
I'm not really.
None of them?
No, because Sindel's in there. Like, I don't give a fuck about anybody else. Do you know what I mean? I do think the Arnold Schwarzenegger likeness is really good. I think it's one of the best models they've ever done. But I think there's a thing, isn't there, with a lot of Hollywood stars where if you use their likeness in something, they have to sign off on it before you have the right to use it. Like, they have to look at the final model and give you the go-ahead. I know that was the case there's a Frankenstein pinball machine that's got like Robert De Niro's Frankenstein in the artwork, and they weren't allowed to put it into production until Robert De Niro looked at the finished piece and said, go ahead. And I think that sometimes happens. So when they get this Terminator Arnie license, they're like, we have to fucking knock this out of the park. Otherwise we can't use it, essentially. And I saw that kind of semi-rumor that you put, but the Hollywood Reporter saying that they've got the likeness, but they haven't actually got him to do the voice. And it seems weird you'd go so far and then not go all the way with it.
Could be like a Simpsons thing where they got Michael Jackson for the words, but not the song.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Someone said something on a forum, a Mortal Kombat forum that I sometimes visit, where they said the irony is given that Arnie's voice has kind of changed over the years, you can probably get someone who can do more of a Arnie as the Terminator voice than Arnie himself.
Probably.
Checks out.
If that makes, yeah. And as for the Ash thing, I still think he's coming to the game. In fact, there's been too much evidence that chainsaw sound turned out to be nothing. Okay, well, why was it there? And I think what's basically gone down, and I'll put money on this, is they were going to put Ash in this Kombat pack, and then Warner's were like, we're managing to get that Joker movie out this year. Put Joker in.
That might explain why he looks like garbage.
Yeah.
And although I've got no proof for this is just a rumor. That when you boot up Mortal Kombat 11, you get like a little pop-up that tells you the new characters are out now, or pre-order the Kombat pack or whatever. And someone on this forum, that's like a hardcore Mortal Kombat forum, with a screen grab, swears fucking blind that morning they booted up Mortal Kombat, and in the list of characters it said Kombat Pack 1 and it had Ash instead of Joker, and then they kind of soft patched that out to change the list so it said Joker on it now.
No, yeah, I believe it. They'll release a season 2 or whatever, and he'll be there.
I actually kind of like the look of the Joker. I know that he's getting made fun of a lot, but to me he looks like if the people who made Riverdale made Batman. Like, that's what the Joker looks like to me. A CW 19-year-old with makeup.
I think my problem with it is that you've got this really good Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, and they just kudos to them for that. And what's the other one? My brain isn't working today. Spawn. And Spawn's Spawn, but it looks good for Spawn, But the Joker looks like he just like, is it a cosplay convention? But like if I cosplayed as the Joker and just showed up to like a professional cosplay shoot, he looks really out of place amongst those other two, because the other two look so good. He looks really bad in comparison to those. If he was in like kind of a generic list or something, but I said on Twitter, it looks like a Ken doll that they dressed up like a Joker.
He looks like a Molly dealer at Comic-Con.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's weird that they can get like Rhonda and Arnold, but they can't get the dude playing the Joker on the upcoming film to do a thing or sign off on his likeness.
Oh, I can imagine Joaquin Phoenix could give a fuck about being in a video game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, I think like Rhonda and Arnie are the kind of people who cannot understand, but are a part of the business of being a face and also being kind of an icon, whereas like Joaquin Phoenix is more someone who's like about the art, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, not knocking him. I think he's a great actor, and I can't wait to see him as the Joker and see what he's like in that role.
I couldn't give a shit about that movie.
Well, okay.
I'm really excited.
Derailing this. It's a Joker
totally.
film. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm excited for it. After watching him, You Were Never Really Here, I think his take on the Joker is going to be really, really interesting to watch.
Hey, maybe I'm dead wrong, but this idea of a whole film built around the Joker and giving him an origin story, it's unnecessary. It's not needed. I don't know. That's what I feel.
You should have stopped with "I don't know." I think you were right there. I think the bad Joker model is, again, people are like leaning into that of like, oh, that's because he wasn't supposed to be ready yet. It was supposed to be Ash, and they've had to pull forward the model, and that's why the model doesn't look as good as the others. Which again could be reaching, but you know,
yeah,
that sounds bullshit to me.
It does. It kind of like into Room 237 territory just a little bit with those kind of thoughts, but yeah. I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, yeah, probably not. I feel like they just couldn't get a likeness for anybody, so they had to kind of wing it.
No, yeah, which I think adds to that. I feel like they just looked up the most generic-ass Joker design they could, accidentally picked out a fucking porn star parody, went, oh shit, we already made this. Well, whatever, we're sticking to it, I guess.
Well, it's like CJ said, it looks like a puffy Molly dealer. It's...
All right, our second story of the day has to do with Sony. We all know that Microsoft has been making big waves recently with its studio acquisitions, and to a lesser extent, THQ Nordic has as well. But this week, Sony cemented a solid purchase of its own. It was announced that Sony is buying Insomniac Games, developer of Ratchet & Clank, Resistance, and one of their most recent biggest titles, Marvel's Spider-Man. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought Sony already owned Insomniac Games before this was announced, given the fact that their first 16 games they ever put out were all for PlayStation exclusives. But then I was reminded that Sunset Overdrive was an Xbox One exclusive and Fuse was a multi-platform release. So clearly I was wrong in thinking that. I just assumed. The developer has also done a bunch of mobile and VR games, the latest of which, Stormland, is an Oculus exclusive. And Occams, we'll start with you because I know you really enjoyed the Spider-Man game, right?
Yeah, for a character that I have a visceral hatred for, I really love that game. It was just fun. It was a really, really good time. And I was kind of in the same boat. I thought that Sony already owned them. So it was like, whoop, shit, cool. If it means they can continue making amazing games with the full support of Sony, awesome. I'm excited for this. Looking forward to the Spider-Man 2 and seeing where it goes.
Do you think with what is happening with Marvel and Disney on the film rights, I'm sorry, not Marvel and Disney, Marvel, Disney, and Sony on the film rights to Spider-Man and the fiasco currently going on with that, do you think it might hurt Sony's chance of getting another Spider-Man as an exclusive with Insomniac Games?
No, I mean, I'm not. I don't know how the sausage is made with a lot of that stuff, and I just read the same articles y'all do. But I feel like they would keep them separate. I think their revenue streams in different areas, and I think if it's the games that are working for them, the Spider-Man game and PlayStation, I don't think they'd want to fuck with that. I think the movie rights be an entire different thing. Now, it may mean that certain aspects, the types of characters from the films, or like the way Iron Spider or something, maybe that won't be in. For
Fantastic Four Spider Baghead, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe there'll be some weird bullshit with that where they have to do other costumes or make up stuff or can't reference certain events in the movies they would have liked to. But I don't think it'll affect them actually appearing in the way they have in the past.
Everyone else here be okay if Spider-Man remained a PlayStation exclusive now that Sony owns Insomniac?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me, but they only own the film rights, right?
No, I'm talking about, Sony owns the film rights to Spider-Man, but I mean, in terms of games, if they keep the license of just these big Spider-Man games with Insomniac, that will de facto make it a PlayStation exclusive going forward.
Yeah, I have no issues with that, but I guess it falls in Marvel's court, really, at the end of the day, but we'll have to wait and see how that political shitfest pans out.
Yeah. I mean, cause the only reason I question this and if it would affect if the movie fiasco would affect the game license is because after that announcement was made, it looked as though Disney hired a bunch of bots on Twitter to start spamming the same fucking message thousands of times, putting the blame on Sony in this negotiation that they were going through. And so I was just wondering if they did do that and they're that petty, how petty would they become?
See, I think for me, it's different divisions. I think it's they're not all talking to each other in that regard. Like whoever's doing the Twitter account stuff ain't necessarily thinking about the video game stuff because that's a whole separate unit versus, the movie, like the production stuff is a whole separate unit from the social media. And I think they're all just operating under the same umbrella, but they're not necessarily affecting each other in that regard. And
like Disney have like admitted that they don't know shit about video games, so that they're just gonna let like other people handle that shit. So they'll probably just stick with what works for the Spider-Man video game, and if Insomniac and Sony are the answer for that, they'll stick with it.
Well, I mean, their first game was already one of the best of last year, so I can't wait to see what they do with the sequel. Mm-hmm. Finally, one of the best developments of this last generation seems to be coming to an end. Microsoft announced this week it's going to cool its jets when it comes to porting some of its smaller, celebrated games to other platforms, including the Nintendo Switch. Cuphead was added earlier this year, and Ori and the Blind Forest, which is one of the first games rumored to make the jump, will be coming next month. Sadly, it looks as though that is it. Microsoft wants to focus on its own platforms going forward, which makes sense given we're on the cusp of a new hardware generation. My only bit of disappointment is that we're getting Ori and the Blind Forest, but not its upcoming sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Anyone else here as disappointed as I am that Switch won't see both of the Ori games?
I mean, I get Microsoft's perspective, though, and the idea of, like, we have a new console coming out, and we need a reason for people to buy this thing, so... But yeah, not having it being a portable thing is definitely a huge letdown. I played the original just, on PC on Windows 10. Thought it was great. So, I'm definitely going to pick that up on Switch, and knowing that, the sequel's not going to be on Switch is kind of a letdown, but at the same time, I feel like when I do eventually get a new box, I'll just play it on there, I guess.
You are listening to Podtoid.
That is it for news, which means it is time for the Podtoid question of the week.
What do you think John Landis's worst contribution to society is? His alleged manslaughter or his son Max?
Sorry, that is not the Podtoid question of the week. God, I'm so sorry about that, because obviously the answer is his son Max.
Yeah.
Damn.
That's great.
So this week's question has to do with Gamescom. We've touched on it briefly all show. It's the biggest gaming show in Europe, making itself out to be like an E3 light with a lot of game announcements. And I just want to hear from each of you, what was your favorite bit of news that came out of Gamescom or Gamescom adjacent announcements? And Charlotte, just because you're geographically closest to the show, let's go ahead and start with you.
So I can't think of anything that really grabbed my attention that much, but I am kind of excited to see Little Nightmares 2. I've not played the first one, but I have quite a few people I know who really like the first one and do speedruns, for example, of the first one. So getting a second one is kind of going to give me a kick up the bum to play the first one. The thing that stood out from me from Gamescom it wasn't really an announcement in the sense of it was a brand new game that was being announced, but it was brand new for me. I didn't know about it before. And that's seeing that somebody was there repping Necro Barista, which is, it was actually supposed to be out already, but it's been delayed. And that's coming out third quarter of this year. And it's a visual novel which takes place in a coffee shop. And it's about the interaction between the living and the dead who drink at the coffee shop. And I'm also really excited for Coffee Talk, which is it's sort of like Valhalla, but with coffee. It's a very similar sort of concepts, actually, Necro Barista and Coffee Talk. Only I think Coffee Talk's a bit more like mythical creatures, and Necro Barista is about the dead. So I'm really looking forward to both of those, but finding out about Necro Barista, so there's a second visual novel game that I can play, which is about drinking coffee, was a really great discovery. So I'm really looking forward to that. Though I might have to wait till next year if I want to play it on PlayStation 4, because it's only the PC and the Mac versions that are coming out this year.
If I remember rightly, didn't you say a few episodes back where we were talking about what video games you'd like to become real life? I think you picked Coffee Talk for that because you just said you'd like to have your own like kind of quaint coffee shop. Yeah,
so I get to play that experience again, but with dead people. It's great. With the dead.
For my parts, it's a smaller announcement. I just am happy that Skate XL is going to be coming to Switch because it has been a very long time since I have played a really good skateboarding game, and I just need one in my life. Like if they could port Tony Hawk's American Skateland or Tony Hawk 2 or Tony Hawk's Proving Grounds to Switch or PlayStation 4, I'd play the shit out of those games because I loved those games. But Tony Hawk sucks now, so this is the only thing I have to look forward to. So yeah, Skate XL on Switch. That's my big announcement of Gamescom.
DJ, I don't think you would want to play, like, some of those you'd probably want to replay, but Underground and Underground 2 have aged so badly. Have you listened to have you rewatched the cutscenes of Underground 2 anytime recently?
No, but I never played Underground or Underground 2.
Oh, the entire thing is like CKY, Bam Margera.
Oh, yeah.
Roadshow.
Yeah, I remember now. Yeah.
I mean, kickflip off the skyscraper to prove you're not gay.
I remember buying the CKY DVDs back in the 2000s, and boy, why did I buy that?
That is peak white dude.
Things.
Oh man, can't kill yourself.
Dan, what about you?
Kerbal Space Program 2. I've yet to play the original game, but I've always been intrigued by that whole concept of, building a rocket and then flying it off to space. Maybe it blows up, maybe it doesn't. And then when you do get to space eventually, landing on a planet or a moon or whatever. And now, at least with 2, one of the big new features is cooperative multiplayer. Just be able to do all of that and all the shenanigans you get up to in the first game and then build a space station and stuff with a friend and watch it all go awry. That sounds incredible. So I'm really intrigued by that.
That sounds like a relationship killer. Chris, what about you?
I'm gonna have to be kind of obvious and boring here and say, like, the thing that I got most excited at was that Cherry Hunter trailer for Streets of Rage 4 because I just think that game continues to look gorgeous. Like, I'm really looking forward to it. I don't think it's gonna. I seem to say this a lot. I don't think it's gonna like rock my world or rock anyone's world, but I just like these games that they come out and they're just really good and they're just great and you just get an experience from them. And even if it doesn't last very long, you can come away from it going, oh, I don't think there were any problems there. And I think Streets of Rage 4 is shaping up to be one of those games. And it looks fucking amazing as well. It just looks so gorgeous. Yeah. And she seems like a pretty cool character as well. Like, she taking a fucking flying V into, like, she does like a knee slide while bashing out a power cord and it's taking people down. I think that stuff's great. So with like old man, there's supposed to be like middle-aged versions of Blaze and Axel, but they both look like they're fucking 22 at best. And Axel's got some stuck-on beard. But I get for a lot of like young gamers, like someone who looks 25 is like, oh, he's the old guy. You know what I mean? It's like,
Occams, let's wrap up with you.
I got a twofer. It's Little Nightmares 2 because Little Nightmares is amazing, and I would really wish they would do an art book. That world, that visual design, so good. And then a game called Blasphemous, which I think they announced was coming to Switch. And I didn't back the Kickstarter for it. I kind of wish I had, but it's looks like what was that game's Death's Gambit, kind of pixelated, almost like a Castlevania sort of side-scrolly thing. But the art style, it's like Hieronymus Bosch meets all those things where Jesus is like crying and bleeding. All those like Renaissance paintings. It's like that, but a video game and Dark Souls kind of stuff mixed in. It looks amazing, and I'm very excited about that for when it comes out. So those are my two.
All right, that is it for this episode of Podtoid. But before we go, do we have a community shout-out this week?
We do. I want to give a shout-out to our own Chris Moyes. Shout out to Chris Moyes. Chris, yeah, not only are you an amazing shout.
Yeah, that was a shout-out.
Should I let it all out?
No.
Oh, sorry, Wes. I tried for a Tears for Fears reference. So. But on top of just being an amazing contributor and community member, you helped me out a hell of a lot with these movies, and have been really added to the conversation for movies that I most want to go, oh, they're awesome, and then I don't have much else to say. So thank you so much for that, buddy. Shout out to you.
I'm glad you gave me that shout out because, to be honest, I get no respect around here.
Oh God.
Oh.
Hey.
Ooh. I gotta go. Is this thing on? Gotta go. Sorry.
I'm so ugly when I commit a crime, they don't call the cops. They call the dog catchers.
Hey, I'm so ugly that my parents went down to the zoo to throw rocks at the storks.
Wow.
Oh, shit.